The Chicago White Sox are back to losing. This time it is because of something that was not discussed too much during that 21 game losing streak. I'll discuss it next on Locked On White Sox.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And hello, I'm your host, Todd Welter, a lifelong Sox fan and the site expert of Southside Showdown. Part of the Fansided Network, you can check out my written content at SouthsideShowdown.com. And also, I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. And thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox. Also follow or subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Well, Davis Martin pitched a gem with 6 scoreless innings of 2-hit ball, and it looked like the White Sox might actually win a series. Then the bad veteran bullpen arms blew the game. Bad veterans still being used is another reason why this team will likely lose 90 games before they win 30 games, along with an offense being led by a sputtering former All-Star that I want to discuss in the first segment. Then Jerry Reinsdorf tenure as owner is something that the Sox fans want to end, but let's discuss the magnitude of the record and accomplishments of this franchise since he took over on January 28th, 1981. And finally, players the White Sox trade away or cut seem to be having success once they leave the Southside. Let's look into that in the third segment. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. All right, one reason I'm convinced that this franchise has lost 89 games before reaching 30 wins is the stubbornness to use bad veterans instead of using the lost season to evaluate the young talent the team has to see who can help moving forward. For example, while I think it was not a great decision by manager Pedro Grifol to use Frazier Ellard in a high-leverage situation last Tuesday as Ellard was making his MLB debut, at some point, it is worth it to see if he can handle pitching in those situations, since he is 26. And while that might be a little bit on the older side of 20, it's still 4 years away from being 30. He's still relatively young. And most importantly, he's a cheap, controllable player that you might want to get a look at. See if he can help during the rebuilding years. The process should dictate, let's give him another shot. The process should also dictate, let's see what some of the younger arms, like Prelander Baroa, Anthony Hoopy Tuan-Tatoa, Trey McCuff, Sean Burke, Addison Coffey, can do the rest of the season. Because this bullpen is gosh awful. And, why not go with some guys that are in their 20s and at least still, a few years away from being 30 and cheap. And remember, cheap, effective bullpens is how small market clubs must operate. And while the Sox are in a large market, they operate like a small market club. And yet, here are the Sox trotting out Touki, Toussaint, and Dominic Leone, veteran players who are bad. Toussaint is 28 and keeps getting DFA'd or not making the club out of spring training. Leone is 32 and keeps blowing hold opportunities. And the Sox keep wasting time with these guys that should not be on the roster. And those two blew a great game pitched by Davis Martin. Now, to be fair to the bullpen, the offense just can't pile up runs. The defense is not always great at backing them up. But one thing that was not discussed enough during that 21-game losing streak is the struggles of Luis Robert Jr. When your best player is going bad, no wonder why you've lost 10 straight series. So let's get into what happened yesterday. Martin reminded you and I that he is not to be forgotten when it comes to the talented young arms the Sox have. Missed all of last season after Tommy John surgery and seemed to have been pushed to the back with the success of younger arms in the minors, such as Noah Schultz, Jake Eder, Nick Nastarini, Jonathan Cannon, Iro Iriarte, Drew Thorpe, Kai Bush, Mason Adams. But Martin showed yesterday what he displayed in 2022, and that he's capable of being a very solid arm at the back of the rotation. Stuff was crisp. Fastball even hit 96 on the gun. Gordon Beckham on the television broadcast just seemed to be mystified by that. He's like, wow, I didn't realize he could still do, he could do that. And they also brought up he was throwing a very effective cutter that he developed because of now with the surgery, how the ball grips. It's almost going to come off as a cutter. and he should have been rewarded with a win. Instead, he gets backed up by Touki, who, let me read you SoxMachine.com's Jim Margulis's recap, because the man is just an outstanding writer and describes it perfectly. A barrage of soft contact doomed Touki Toussaint and Dominic Leone in the seventh, or Dominic Leone. No, it's Leone. I think it's Leone. In the seventh, although the White Sox also contributed a couple of their own mistakes. Brent Rooker reached on a flared liner to center to start the inning, then moved to second on a one-out walk to Abraham Torum, 296 OBP this year. That pushed a runner into scoring position, and Armando Alvarez pushed him home with a looped single to left that chased Toussaint from the game. Leone couldn't change the tone. Zach Geloff did the same thing to score Toro, which tied the game at 2, and then Geloff did that thing where the White Sox couldn't get him out. Daryl Hernandez hit a full count sinker to short. Nicky Lopez ranged to his right and fired to second, but Geloff beat the ball there. A replay showed that Andrew Vaughn played so far off the bag that Geloff could take a massive secondary lead, and that 90 feet decided the game, because when Lawrence Butler hit a routine fly to left, it was the go-ahead sacrifice fly instead of the third out. Now, the other thing that that Margulis did not put into his excellent written recap is Lopez on that ground ball. It was a tough play, but he goes to second. And as Gordon Beckham pointed out on the television broadcast, he should have went to first. He gets to first. Okay, it's the second out. And then that sac fly is out number 3. You're tied 2-2. And the other thing I just got to say is stop using these guys. Stop using these veteran bad bullpen arms. Now, yes, some poor luck and bad defense contributed to Touki and Leone blowing it up. But at the same time, nothing is gained if that happens to them. No data points for the future to take place. We know what they are. They're not going to be on this team next year. And if they are, oh boy. But if Frazier Ellard, and I'm not trying to sound like I'm part of his fan club, or Addison Coffey screw up there, data point for the future. We get to know, can they handle high leverage situations? And I know Perlander Baroa got roughed up during his last call-up, but I'm fine with that. Why? Data points. Evaluation. That's what this should be. And that's what the rest of the season should be. And yet, Leone, Touki, they get trotted out there. Chad Kuhl, well, he's been pitching well. And I said, yes, on a couple shows ago, he probably should be in the bullpen. But even in the starting rotation, Chris Flexen, really? We know what he is. I want to see what Kai Bush and Mason Adams can do. And I know Leone was part of the bullpen's valiant effort 2 days ago to break that 21-game losing streak. This bullpen has blown 29 saves and more than 40 leads, and Leone is one of them. And I forgot he was even on the team because he was on IL. Then when you look at his numbers, they're terrible. And I would prefer the narrative be it was blown by cheap arms, where the oldest to say maybe 27, than these busted bums. The team wasted opportunities to get Jonathan Cannon more innings in because they feel to start. Because they foolishly believed Mike Clevenger and Brad Keller could build up their trade value. And now that the trade deadline has passed, there's no reason to see what Touki, Leone, and even John Brebbia can do. There's no logical reason to have them out there anymore. DFA them and let them go play for a winner for all I care. Now, the offense should have put up more than 2 runs, but credit Oakland's pitching staff for retiring 15 of the last 16 batters to close out the game. And after putting up 2 runs in the second, they did limit the Sox bats to just 4 singles and no walks the rest of the way. Now, the no walks, that's on the Sox. Come on, be more patient. Foul off more pitches. Get more counts in your favor. Luis Robert, or get more, even if you're fouling off pitches, get the pitcher to then throw you a mistake or get him tired out and get him the heck up out of there. But Luis Robert Jr. is beyond struggling at the plate. He's been downright bad. And yes, you can say Luis Robert Jr. has been bad lately. It's okay, because that's what he has. And it's hard for your offense to function when your best bat is hitting 207 with a 687 OPS. And he claims to be fully healthy. And over the past 30 games, he is slashing 180, 223, 292 with just 2 home runs. Now, he's stealing a lot of bases when he rarely gets on base, so that's nice to see. And that's, again, an indication that he should be healthy now. And this is what the Chicago Sun-Times White Sox beat reporter Daryl Van Schouwen wrote up. But Roberts' underperformance hindered any ideas that the Sox might have had about dealing him in late July. And without Roberts' bat, an offense ranking last in baseball in runs and many other categories has no chance of being a threat. Quote, there have been days where I haven't found that consistency that I want. I'm still trying to get that, end quote, Robert told the Sun-Times. Quote again, it's more about the mental part where things aren't going your way. You start thinking more, hesitate, and doubt a little bit. That's the hardest thing to fight. That's what I'm dealing with, end quote. Robert has been prone to chasing pitches out of the strike zone, especially on balls in the dirt and some indecision. I think he needs to go back to what his trainer was telling him to do last year. Remember, he did start 2023 with a 213 average and a 254 on base percentage. And then he went back to just doing some drills he did in the offseason with his personal trainer and hitting coach. And he had an MVP caliber season. And again, that was also an indictment on the coaching staff last year. Like Jake Berger had to go to his wife for hitting advice. Luis Robert Jr. had to go to his personal trainer and hitting coach. I think that's what he should do. Stop listening to Pedro. Listen to the people that helped you become an MVP or near MVP. Well, something that has not been MVP caliber is the ownership tenure of Jerry Reinsdorf. And I want to discuss the magnitude of his failures as owner of the team over the last 43 years next on Locked On White Sox. The White Sox record might be historically awful, but they still have the crosstown rival, the Chicago Cubs, coming to Guaranteed Rate Field tomorrow, and the New York Yankees follow. The Crosstown Classic is always fun to see live, no matter what both teams' records are, because it's a celebration of Chicago. Plus, Aaron Judge and Juan Soto are two players that you should see in your lifetime. And use Game Time to get your tickets at the most affordable price. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it is to the first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. Get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, and the lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. And thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen today. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On MLB podcast. Host Paul Sullivan, a.k.a. Sully, is here daily to provide national expertise with his trademark humor to help you get ready for the MLB playoffs here in the dog days of summer. Prepare for the Fall Classic with Sully, who has it all covered every single day on Locked On MLB, available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And the White Sox are off today, but start a 2-game series tomorrow with their crosstown rival, the Chicago Cubs. First pitch is at 7:10 p.m. Central. Catch every pitch of the White Sox hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search White Sox. And welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I am your host, Todd Welter. And again, make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox. Make sure to turn on those notifications. And if you haven't already, also follow or subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Okay, so every fan wants owner Jerry Reinsdorf to sell the team. I'm one of them. I think he should sell. But as 670 The Score's Dan Bernstein pointed out a few days ago, the latter part of his ownership is like the fall of an empire. You have this owner who once was on top of the world, especially in 2005 when he won a championship as the Sox owner, and that was to go along with his 6 rings as a Bulls owner. But now hindsight being 2020 is kind of lucked into that 2005 World Series championship as they just caught lightning in a bottle. But hey, winning is winning, and I will take that championship because there's a lot of guys and gals in pine boxes who never saw the White Sox win a World Series. But nearly 20 years later, he might be the worst owner in baseball who has surrounded himself with yes men who are unqualified to be the general manager and the manager. And what is sad is Jerry has instructed his heirs to sell the team once he passes away, although he did hint that if a new ballpark is secured, the Reinsdorf family may keep the team. And seeing how the Bulls are run, that is another reason to keep rooting for Governor J.P. Pritzker and the state assembly to tell Jerry no. But what's sad is he's still holding on to the team when he's been such a failure as an owner lately that why wait? You know? And next week, Ozzie Guillen Jr. will discuss Jerry, the man, and the owner. And that insight does give a little bit into Jerry being the owner as a man who usually finds people that are just not very good at allocating the resources he provides. However, I've never been a fan of him basically putting a self-imposed salary cap and those limited financial resources, especially when he claims he wants to win one more championship before he leaves this earth. And money should be no object in that case then. And you're wondering, why am I discussing this? Why am I baiting, more comments of sell the team, Jerry? Well, on Sox social media world, his wanting to hire Chris Getz as the GM without interviewing anyone else last year is making the rounds again. Basically, it's being brought up. Jerry says, I owe the fans to turn things around quickly. And Chris Getz can do that. And, clearly we are now in the beginning stages of a rebuild because Chris Getz could not turn around this team in quick fashion because a lot of things were stacked against him, to be fair. No free agent was going to come here with the toxic reputation the team had. You had to get a lot of then players with high wars to turn things around. And that wasn't going to happen. Now, Getz did make a calculated risk that blew up in his face by trying to improve the defense and focus on run prevention instead of run scoring. And now you are in the beginning stages of another rebuild. And that is what you get with an owner who is 3,402 to 3,452 record since buying the club with his partners, 7 playoff appearances, and 6 division titles. So 14% of the time he has been owner, the team has won a division title. Now, to be fair, early in his ownership, it was hard to win the division since there was just 2 divisions and no wild card. But that changed about 14 years into his ownership. And there are even now more opportunities to make the playoffs. And they just don't do it. Plus, the Sox have been in the AL Central for the majority of his ownership with 3 teams that rarely spend. Basically, the Tigers used to spend, but now they kind of operate like a small market team. But there was a time when Mike Ilyich was spending like a drunken sailor. But you have Cleveland, Minnesota, and Kansas City who have always said we are small, who obviously are diehard, operate like a small market team. And the Sox should be able to out-acquire players, outspend for players. And they've never been able, they just don't do that. And instead, you have the small market Minnesota Twins and Cleveland Guardians continue to amass young talent in front of you and keep the White Sox in their rearview mirror as they did in the late 1990s and most of the 2000s. Then it was Kenny Williams just continually going for it and not doing a good job of rental players like Bill Veeck did in the late 70s. Although his late 70s teams also got blocked in the playoffs by just always having a team just be a bit better. This has been an owner whose loyalty and belief that baseball should be played like his beloved Brooklyn Dodgers in the 1950s has basically put this team in the current state that it's in. That's why this organization is also has only 89, has 89 losses. He has been surrounding himself with the yes men recently. He's being very loyal to them. And he still believes the game should be played like it was in the 1950s, and it should be paid like it is in the 1950s. And the biggest problem, though, in my opinion, with Jerry's ownership has been the inability to acquire long-term elite talent like they did early and midway through his ownership. That's a big thing that's been missing. Think about it. Carlton Fisk, Frank Thomas, Robin Ventura, Maglio Ordonez, Albert Bell, Carlos Lee, Paul Konerko, Jermaine Dye, Jack McDowell, Alex Fernandez, Wilson Alvarez, Mark Burley, Freddie Garcia, Chris Sale, and the list could go on and on. They used to acquire guys that were very good baseball players, near elite. And I listed 2 Hall of Famers. And that doesn't happen anymore. The Sox have not strung together an amazing draft like they did in 87 through 90. They've not made major free agent swings like they did when bringing in Albert Bell. And you could say, well, they didn't win with him. It was still a huge swing at the time. He got, Jerry actually gave the richest free agent contract in MLB history at the time. Nobody got a double-digit annual salary until he handed over that 5 years, $55 million deal to Albert Bell. And then now when they have, it's just incrementally gone up. I believe the richest free agent contract Benintendi had was $75 million. So by 20 million, and even then, they're targeting guys that are cheap or defective when it comes to elite free agents in their perspective. Andrew Benintendi, Yasmani Grandal, Dallas Keuchel, Adam Dunn. That's why a lot of these guys, when they sign them, then just go bad because they're either on the decline or they're not really worth that investment. And I think that is the magnitude of why the Sox are in this current position. They're just no longer operating, because they were at least a solid franchise in the 90s and the 2000s. They were frustrating as heck because, they just could not make, the big acquisition or a couple more acquisitions to get ahead of the Twins or the Guardians. Well, what they were at the time. Or they just could not win that big series against them. But the few times they did, they won the division. They just couldn't do it consistently. But now it's like, where's the elite talent that they keep acquiring? I just talked about it. Luis Robert Jr. is struggling. Garrett Crochet, and that's the other thing. Then they trade him away. They just get rid of him. They're going to trade Garrett Crochet because they don't want to pay him. That's a huge thing now. And yes, they didn't want to pay Jack McDowell, but they took him all the way up to 1995 and then traded him. And I believe they gave him at least a 3-year deal. Anyways, it also does not help when players do leave the White Sox. They seem to find greener pastures. So let's discuss that next on Locked On White Sox. Get supplies from the site that's made for the skilled trade, supplyhouse.com. Supplyhouse.com is the reliable way to order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Shop a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands and get your order delivered right to your door with fast shipping from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Get expert support and an industry-leading service from the friendliest folks in the business and talk to a real person every time. Pros in the skilled trades can get a competitive edge by joining SupplyHouse.com's free TradeMaster program. Every TradeMaster gets access to the dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. And join the thousands of trade pros already benefiting from their free membership at supplyhouse.com/TM and order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from anywhere with just a few clicks at supplyhouse.com. And the White Sox are off today, but start a 2-game series tomorrow with their crosstown rival, the Chicago Cubs. First pitch is at 7:10 p.m. Central. Catch every pitch of the White Sox hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search White Sox. And welcome back into Locked On White Sox. I am your host, Todd Welter. Shout out to all my everydayers, the guys that stick with me and gals every day and that stick with me through this. Now, programming note. I'm going to be on vacation tomorrow. I had this trip booked for Disney World before taking over hosting duties. And I even pushed it back a few days because of Hurricane Debbie. So I am off the 9th through the 16th. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to run a series on basically being a Sox fan. I'm going to talk to, they're in the media, whether it's social media world, the blogosphere, covering the team currently, that type of stuff. I want to get the perspectives of them and pass it along to you. And that's what I did. So I've lined up Sean Anderson from CHGO, also former host of Locked On White Sox. He's going to be on tomorrow. Well, I'm going to put together what I've already talked to him about, the current and future state of the White Sox. That'll run tomorrow. So the current and future state of White Sox fandom. Matt Flesh of Last Comiskey, he's going to be on next Monday to discuss Old Comiskey Park and the retro fandom. Missy Carroll of Sports Mockery next Tuesday to discuss the White Sox social media world. Ozzie Guillen Jr. next Wednesday, and it was such a great conversation I had with him, and we basically talked for an hour. Then I'm splitting it up. He's also, I'm also going to run then part 2 on Thursday to discuss growing up around the White Sox, and then from the 108.com's Teresi and My Sox Summer, I'm going to run that when I talk to them next Friday to discuss what's like at the ballpark now and building a fan movement. Also note, I had to record some of these conversations last month based on just availability. So some of these interviews will not mention the 21-game losing streak, but I think the information is still relevant, and I think you're going to enjoy it. So maybe going to a winner is all it takes for some of these Sox players to play better, former Sox players. And I think NBC Sports Chicago's Chuck Garfien made that point on the most recent White Sox Talk podcast. But whatever the reason is, it's not a good look for the White Sox. It does not look great that Eloy Jimenez is hitting .500 since being traded to the Baltimore Orioles, or Michael Kopech has allowed 1 hit in 4 games since going to the Dodgers, or that Tommy Pham is hitting .379 in the 8 games that he's played for the Cardinals since being traded, or Romy Gonzalez becoming a solid bench player for the Boston Red Sox with a .284 average and an .813 OPS, and then maybe discovering, hey, he can hit left-handed pitching. Let's just have him hit left-handed pitching. Or Ronaldo Lopez failed as a starter for the Sox, eventually goes to Atlanta, and he's an all-star. Kevin Pillar was DFA'd earlier this year after hitting .160, goes to the Los Angeles Angels, and his slash line is .284, .325, .455. Now, Pillar production, that's the biggest indictment on the theory that former Sox players thrive elsewhere. Since Pillar's on a terrible team, and the Angels are bad. They're not as bad as the White Sox, because the White Sox are at a whole different level of being awful, but they're still bad, and he's producing. And the one thing Pham, Eloy, Kopech, Gonzalez, and Lopez have in common is they're on winners. A lot of the Sox just gave up on too quickly. And quite frankly, they probably could have used his leadership a bit more. And had he started to hit, he could have netted a scratch-off prospect, just like Tommy Pham. And Getz wanted to improve the clubhouse culture, and it sounds like it is a better environment. But if he wants a better class of free agents, or if he wants to shed this thing where, hey, if I go to the Southside, I'm going to bottom out, he either needs to start overpaying for free agents or find a way to get guys to live up to their potential here. That's got to be the key. And also, a big thing is just understanding, what can your guys do? I mean, Eloy is thriving because he's not being asked to do too much in Baltimore than he was in Chicago. Same for Kopech. I mean, Eloy's not being asked to be like an anchor bat, a foundational bat like he was on the South Side. And now, does Eloy have the talent? Yes, and he showed it in 2019. But injuries and the fact that, he's so inconsistent with trying to elevate the ball has made it clear he was not going to be a foundational bat. He's a supporting cast guy in the lineup. And that's where he's thriving right now. He's not being asked to, you got to crush 30 or 40 home runs. He's being asked to just keep the line moving. And if he's got runners on, bring them in. Same thing with Kopech. He's not being asked to be the closer. He's being utilized in high leverage situations, yes, but high leverage situations where he's proven he can thrive. And again, Romy Gonzalez, Pedro Grifol tried to make him an everyday regular when that just was not the case. And that's what the Sox have to honestly look at. Are we asking guys to do more than they're capable of? And if they're not capable of rising above, how do we acquire more talent to put them then in those complementary pieces? Well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. And thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen today. Now go check out the Locked On MLB podcast. Prepare for the Fall Classic with Sully, who has it covered every single day. Who has it all covered every single day. You can find the link to Locked On MLB in the description, so you don't need to search. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And as I said a few minutes ago, I'm on vacation starting tomorrow, so the fan series starts then. Hopefully you love what I have in store for you as CHGO's Sean Anderson kicks off that series. Feel free to leave comments about today's discussion regarding the Sox losing because they are just using bad veteran players more than they should be doing when it comes to, hey, play some more younger guys. The magnitude of Jerry Reinsdorf ownership's failures and former players thriving elsewhere. You can leave them at the episode page on YouTube, X, formerly Twitter, at Todd J. Dub or at Locked On Sox, or email me at lockedonwhitesox@gmail.com. Have a great day. Enjoy the fan series starting tomorrow.